What is happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and boy, oh boy, do we have an exciting tidbit of news to discuss. So this is a piece of news that started doing the rounds a little bit earlier today, and it has everyone abuzz and a lot of folks talking. If we're being honest, it really isn't anything all that significant, but the conversation is happening. Obviously, I have opinions on it, which you obviously know as we get into this conversation. And so, of course, I wanted to talk about it. Maybe I'm adding to the buzz over something that isn't all that significant, but hey, that's what I like to do on my channel, talk about these cool things when they come up, because again, this specific topic I obviously do very much care about and have some thoughts on. So what happened is a well-known fellow from Digital Foundry, whose name is John Linneman, recently discussed on their own podcast some of what he thinks and or has heard from developers. So he is kind of claiming this to be stuff that he heard as a bit of an industry leak or a rumor. He's not making his own predictions. He's kind of saying that this is stuff that has been discussed and confirmed behind the scenes. Apparently, he's saying that he's heard that the idea of a Switch Pro, not something that was truly next generation, but something that would have been more of a slight upgrade to the current Switch, was apparently planned, but during COVID, things changed, the Switch Pro never actually happened, and now Nintendo has actually moved all of their efforts into something that will truly be their next generation successor. Obviously, this is huge for me because I am very excited at the prospect of new Nintendo hardware in any way, shape, or form. The Switch Pro thing, man, that was a hot button topic for about, 3 or so years there, where everyone thought it was coming. There was plenty of people claiming inside knowledge, finding little things and posts on different websites and whatnot that maybe hint to this kind of chipset was going to go into this kind of device and a Switch Pro would exist. And I certainly, believed that it was possible for a while. I never claimed to know anything inside information. I'm also not very smart when it comes to tech stuff anyway. You guys know that, so I am not the guy to talk about those kinds of things. I just discussed the rumors and conversations as they happened. And so I was a little up and down on the Switch Pro thing, but pretty early on to even that conversation. I know you guys get sick of hearing me say this, but I kind of felt like the Pro wasn't really going to happen because that made less sense to me. And just waiting until it made sense to go next gen was the thing that, to me, just in my own personal analysis as a fan and nothing more, that felt like a smarter business choice to me than just like a slight Pro upgrade that wouldn't really change the Switch's library. Getting better frame rates and resolutions would always have value, of course, but I think that they need to create something that allows for games that can't currently play on the Switch, which is why I kind of shifted my focus to next gen a few years ago. Now, according to Nintendo Everything, this is what they say about what John Linneman said on their podcast. After speaking with some developers, he believes Nintendo was at one point toying around with a Switch hardware refresh. However, quote, that seems to no longer be happening, and the company is apparently pursuing a true successor instead. Here is the full quote that they point out from the podcast. So I think at one point internally, from what I can understand from talking to different developers, is that there was some sort of mid-generation Switch update planned at one point, and that seems to no longer be happening. And thus, it's pretty clear that whatever they do next is going to be the actual next generation hardware. I don't think it's going to be 2023. So there's a lot of really good and very interesting stuff to take away from this. First and foremost, what I want to say, and I just want to remind people what is already obvious to everyone, that none of this is confirmation. John Linneman definitely might have some inside connections. I mean, the Digital Foundry guys, they've been around for a while. They do know folks. It's entirely possible, but this is nothing more than just a guy who works at an outlet with some connections, claiming to have heard some things, and then also making a bit of a prediction. So none of this should be taken as complete fact. And think about it. Some of what he's saying there even supports the theory that I've been talking about for a few years, but even I'm going to tell you, let's not yet take this as fact, okay? I think we're jumping a little bit too much in when we take it as fact. However, there could be something to it. Like I said, he and the Digital Foundry guys do have some connections, and I do believe he might have been having conversations with developers about all sorts of different things. So then we jump into what he said about the idea of a Switch Pro or a Switch upgrade, and that at one point, that maybe was going to happen. All those conversations about Switch Pro this and small upgrade that, new Switch whatever that we were talking about for a few years though, maybe there really was something to that, and Nintendo was planning it. And what seems to maybe have happened is during COVID and the very famous chip shortage that affected all tech and all industries, maybe during that period, because of the shortages, they realized we can't make the Switch Pro thing, so let's just abandon it outright. To me, that tracks and makes complete sense, because even though I kind of changed my tune on the Switch Pro thing and started talking more about a next-gen Switch a few years ago, I do still think it makes sense that at one point Nintendo would have been considering a Switch Pro, and of course COVID very likely would have affected that. To me, even though this is all kind of theory and conjecture and coming from somebody who may or may not know some real details, it does all line up to me. So I'm willing to believe that there could be a lot of truth to this. They were planning a Pro upgrade, COVID made it impossible, so they scrapped the idea and decided instead to move all of their resources and their business model plans to a next-gen console, maybe a little bit quicker than they would have planned if in fact they did have a chance to release the Pro. But since the Pro clearly doesn't seem to be happening and was canceled, if any of this is true, obviously, they might instead be thinking, let's start planning for the next generation. I also want to point out that there is a great chance that whatever plans they might have had for a Switch Pro during maybe the COVID years, and of course, they would have been planning this before COVID happened, we can't forget. This could have been stuff that in 2019 they were already preparing for. 2020 came along and gave us COVID, and then plans changed. So before COVID, they were probably planning on doing a Pro, if any of this is true. During COVID, they couldn't do that, but maybe what they did do is a slight pivot to the Nintendo Switch OLED. We can't forget that even during the famous part shortage of COVID, the Nintendo Switch OLED was revealed and released in 2021 in the middle of COVID. So they did get something new that boasted some newer capabilities out of the market. Was it an actual upgrade? Did it improve on the 2017 tech? No. They added an Ethernet port to the dock, and they added a better kickstand, and they made a much nicer screen. And so that has valuable to portable play. But the power and the output, the performance, the architecture of the Switch, it's still the same 2017 components. The OLED is not the Pro, but it is a new device that did release during the time that it sounds like, according to John Linneman, we might have instead seen an actual Pro. So my conspiracy theory from hearing his words is that maybe the Pro became the OLED, so they had some kind of stopgap new hardware to introduce and to kind of keep some of these strong Switch sales rolling, keep that money train rolling. They gave us an OLED instead of a Pro, and are instead now, again, as I've said so many times, now thinking about next gen. And so, of course, John says that this probably means the next generation, the Switch 2, the new Nintendo console, whatever it is, hybrid, not hybrid, something completely kooky that we could never predict. He thinks that that's probably what they're doing. I think that as well, right? You guys know, I've been saying it for a while, I think that's the plan. Now, again, he's only just guessing, so there's not any concrete evidence or actual behind-the-scenes info he's trying to say that says the next generation is right around the corner. That's his conjecture here, okay? I want to put that out there, but let's also focus in on the date, because obviously I want to talk about the date aspect, because I've definitely been predicting a specific date that we would see the next generation. I said we would see it in 22 or 23, and I think there's even still a chance we play it in 2023. He says, and again, this is part of his guessing, okay? He's not the be-all, end-all. I mean, John Linneman knows stuff. We're talking about this story coming from his words, so it has some value. He might be completely right. He might be completely wrong. But we should point out that his guess is that he says he doesn't think it's going to happen in 2023. So that's the interesting thing. Will we play new Nintendo hardware, Switch 2, next gen, whatever? Will we play it in 2023? John doesn't think we will. That's what he says. I don't think we will. I, however, do still think, and I'm going to stick to this because I felt it for a while and I still feel it now. I think before 2023 is over, we will see the new hardware, the new console, the new idea and concept and gimmick and whatever Nintendo is working on. We're going to see it before the end of 2023. I believe that's possible. And to be fair to John Linneman's words, my prediction of seeing it before 2023 is over could still make his guess accurate if we don't play the thing until 2024. right? This is a long-winded way for me to say, I think we might see it in 2023, but maybe we don't play it until 2024. They could announce it in October next year and then release it in March 2024. That's the exact window that happened with the Switch. They showed us the Switch. They revealed and confirmed it in October 2016 and then released it 6 months later in March 2017. So maybe they do the same thing, right? And we would still see this console or this device next year. Then there's also the chance that I'm wrong and maybe that's not going to happen. Maybe 2023 is going to come and go. My predictions for the last 2 years will be wrong and we don't see hide nor hair of it next year. And then we wait to see if 2024 is when we actually see this new console and this new device, which would line up a little bit with what John is predicting here. So it's all very interesting. No one knows for sure. I'm sticking to my predictions. I think we're going to see the thing next year. And I even think I'm about 60-40 that we might even play it next year. I don't think it's impossible for them to reveal the thing in spring or summer and then release it before the end of the year. Although revealing it near the end of the year probably makes the most sense, and then maybe it would actually release in early 2024. But John might be right. John might be wrong. We don't know, but it's interesting to start to hear some actual conversation, not about Switch Pro, not about Switch OLEDs, but about actual next-gen Nintendo tech in some way from somebody who is in the industry, claiming to have heard inside information, and then adding some of his own guesses and predictions onto it as well, right? Half of his statements were what he says he heard from developers. The other half are his own personal guesses and predictions. So when you reread or re-listen to that quote that was said here, just remind yourself of kind of the two halves of the statement here. But it's all very interesting. I can't wait to see how it plays out. Whether I'm right or wrong, to me, I just can't wait to see what Nintendo has to show us in the future. I think it's very exciting.